Welcome back, Metrology fans, to another great episode. We're having awesome episodes, Henry. Welcome back,
Yes, we are.
Henry. We have joining us today Jane Weitzel, another one of your authors of this, right, Henry?
Yes, and
ASQ
Jane is a
Metrology Handbook.
phenomenal speaker. She has presented almost everywhere, I think, at this point. I had the pleasure of attending, I think, 2 different sessions at A2LA, if that makes. I know one for certain that we talked afterwards, and it was phenomenal. Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm super happy to have Jane on today and
Well,
what
Jane,
Jane
welcome.
does.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Right. And we kind of have a tradition here that we start off with, how did you get into this wild world of metrology, right? Like, it's not something that we're all taught about in school. A lot of people like myself, you just kind of get thrown into it. How did you get into it?
Oh, I like the term you used, wild world of metrology,
It
because
is,
when
isn't
you
it?
get into it, you find out it is wild. uh, I think I got into it by asking the question why and asking the question how. And so my background is I'm a chemist and I worked in the laboratory and I started off in the mining industry for 20 years, gold, silver, all those little metals. And started to ask questions. Okay, I've done this analysis and somebody else is doing this analysis. How do we know that the results compare? And I was trained as a classical chemist, and it was gravimetric and the titrations, all of that stuff. And I started to ask that question. I think also for me, I was phenomenally lucky to be in the mining industry because they started reaching out for quality. They had this Geostandards newsletter that they published every 2 months that they asked these questions, and they tried different ways. They started making reference materials, and we learned a lot from going to the moon as well. A little bit of a story there, and there is a great link, a little story, AMC technical briefs, if you look them up, But the question was, and this is before I was working in the industry, but they were going to go collect the rocks from the moon and bring them back, and everybody wanted to analyze them. And then they said, we should make sure. I know we're all really good. They were very confident how good they were. We're all really good. But let's just do a round robin and we'll analyze something and make sure we're okay. We all agree. The fundamental of metrology is agreement. And they did this little study and they were all shocked. The results were terrible. They were off by percentages amongst each other. So they after they got over their shock, they looked at it and figured out, and they compared their methods and fixed them. So eventually they were agreeing. And then they were ready to analyze the rocks from the moon. And so that mining industry was very well aware of this need for agreement. And I was lucky to be working in the industry. I read the journal every 2 months when it came out and started applying it, and then became involved in that, setting up an accreditation program for the mining industry. Lots of stories there, a lot of fraud, if you've ever heard of Bre-X. But that's how I got started.
Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, if you get into the highest levels of metrology, especially in things like temperature, mining is huge. I mean, we need the purest of metals for fixed points and things like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
that's something that over the years I'm sure it has changed. So what did they figure out was the main issue? Just straight method? I know there was a point in time when we were trying to figure out the worldwide triple point of water, right, as an example of this. And it came down to, like, even NIST was way off from others. And it came down to the water quality, right? They had to standardize the isotopic principles of the water they're using. Is it something similar to that, or was it just straight up they were all doing different procedures, basically?
I think it was more the latter, because at that time, most of the methods were before instrumentation, and they were classical, and it was gravimetric and using chemical reactions to separate out and make them pure, and then weigh or titrate, and then you've got the purity of what you're titrating with, and it's how you do it. What's your end point? How do you weigh? And is your balance good? I had one balance, this is back when they were mechanical, and the half-gram weight was off.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to find that out. So there were these things happening. And they just, how do you weigh? Oh, that's how I do. Oh, okay. Well, let's all weigh the same way.
Well, in that weighing industry, you're saying, that a widespread fraud, like even to this day, when I was doing commercial calibration, some of the worst offenders of bad calibration, I'm using air quotes for people just listening, not seeing this, those bad calibrations, right? Those bad actors out there, a lot of them are in weighing, and sometimes using just face value and not any calculations or actual values, that type of stuff.
I like it, Ryan, when the right, Jane here, when the bias goes your way, that you get more money, you discount the bias, and when it goes against you, it makes sure people account for the bias, right? Is that
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So in the accreditation world, when we added uncertainty to the requirement, right, and they're analyzing these gold bricks and they're going to sell them, and then the accountants found out about uncertainty. To your point, Henry, what they did is if they were selling, they would add the uncertainty to the value. And if they were buying, they would subtract it, and they would each do their calculations that way. And then that would force them to go to a third lab called an umpire lab to compare.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we said, no, that's the wrong use. You shouldn't do that. Don't do that.
That's how we make more money.
Yeah. Well, you're saying the chemical method for all of this. It's funny with the rise of things like TikTok and that, or YouTube. I am on YouTube all the time. I've actually seen those processes now. You'll see people doing different purities of metals, but it's all through different, like acid processes and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, some of those analyzing the gold bricks and that, they are still the classical methods. It is still a titration.
That's cool.
Gives you the best result. Yeah. You mentioned before about NIST and that, and one story is for when instrumentation started to come out. And, the mining industry, when they had that moon experience, started round robins, I'll call them inter-laboratory studies that were huge. And they made certified reference materials out of that. It's all wonderful. And so they had these nice methods. And then, the instrumentation started coming. I remember looking at one inter-laboratory study, and everybody had a nice normal distribution of their results. And then there's this one lab that was way different. We all laughed. Ha, 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 ha. They made a mistake. And then a couple of, next round robin study, there were two labs that had results that were way out. And we said, what? And they looked at it, and it turned out that those labs were using the new instruments, the inductively coupled plasma instruments.
Oh.
And their results were right.
Yeah.
Yep, their results were right.
Just for reference, how long ago was this?
Oh, yeah, early 90s, in the 90s.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's when the ICP started to come out, and oops.
So did they, with your interest there, did you start getting involved in conferences and all that? Is that what kind of led you down the road?
Yes. Yeah, seeing all this, and then working in the mining industry, the chemists there were saying there's a lot of fraud in this industry, and we need to protect ourselves, we being the chemists who didn't act in the fraud. Or you'd have people who fraud, and they bring in samples and we'd analyze them. We needed to protect ourselves, so we were doing the right thing and protecting ourselves from their fraud. And we started an accreditation program for that. And I had just taken a course in quality assurance certificate. And so I joined the first committee to set up an accreditation program for the mining industry. And that was in 1993. And then shortly after that, the Bre-X fraud occurred. Which
do you mind describing that for the listeners?
Yes. So that's the world's largest gold fraud. And if you
Mm.
do, there is a Hollywood made a movie out of it. I think it's called Gold. It's a good movie, but it doesn't
Oh,
give the chemists enough credibility,
no,
credit. And they
yeah,
don't mention metrology and traceability at all. So it's kind of, but it's a good movie.
that's Matthew
Uh,
McConaughey, I believe.
yes.
Yep,
Yes,
yep,
you're right. Yeah.
yeah. It was a good.
Uh,
It is a very good movie. Yeah.
yeah, they were quite and they're still finding things. I think a couple of years ago, they found the guy's skeleton and that kind of thing. The one
Yikes.
who exited the helicopter. So there's a lot behind the story. I won't go into it all in great detail, but it was fraud. It was an island down in the South Asia there, and they said, "Oh, we found gold," and uh, the investors started investing and buying the stocks, and the stocks went way up and up and up, and huge amount, and billions of dollars. Uh, and then they found out it was fraud. And from the chemistry point of view, there's a couple of things. One, um, because we had the accreditation program in place, I actually received a phone call from a journalist saying, what can you talk to me about this Bre-X thing and the laboratories? And they said, well, we've already started creating an accreditation program for the chemists, and we've implemented a bit of it. And so you can trust the results from the labs. And they published that in the paper. And, after that, we chemists, they didn't really look at us very much. They focused more on where the problems were. I know
Mm.
there was a lab in Canada, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police went into the lab and reviewed everything that they did. And they had everything. It was all fine. So, just to end the story, the way they found out the fraud was through statistics. They,
Interesting.
they Yeah, the guys Phil and that they were adding gold to the samples on the pool table. They had a pool table and the little bags with the sand in it, and then they'd add the right amount of gold into each. But they had variability between the bags, but not enough to calculate the variability from sampling.
I see.
And I know Jan Merckx he did the calculations, and he said the uncertainty from sampling is 0. That's not possible.
Right. From just
Uh,
sand
They're
that you're grabbing
perfect.
out there.
They knew
yeah,
exactly how much to add, and they weren't smart enough to make it a little under or a little over.
yes,
So they were
yeah.
weighing it all out. I was curious about that. Can you tell when you look at gold and some of the other minerals, can you tell where it's from? This is something I do not know.
A great question. In this case, yes, because for gold, there's basically 2 kinds. Alluvial, which you get in the stream, you see up in the Yukon where they go and do the little, get it out of the stream, and then you have little shapes. And it's essentially a gold nugget that's rounded from being rolling in the water. It's got a round
Right.
shape to it. And that's the kind of gold that they used to do the adding the gold. And so, yeah, the labs are looking at it under the microscope because the gold that comes from hard rock mining is sharp, or you can't even see it. It's embedded in the ores. Yeah,
Hmm.
so they use the wrong kind of source of gold, the alluvial, the round stuff, instead of the others.
That's
So they
where
should have hired a chemist as the end of the story.
yeah,
They
these
should have.
criminal organizations, they don't know uncertainty. Where's their
Ah,
metrologist, their criminal metrologist?
There's money out there for
Could you
metrologists
imagine the evil scientist Dillup out there?
Dillip. Oh yeah, I made
Like
him
an
the. I was.
evil version of Dillup out there?
Oh, we'll have to put this up at some point, right? I'll send it to you. And Jane knows Dillip quite well. Maybe I can pull it up here somehow, and share it. I'll work on that. I'll send you guys something we can have a laugh
oh, that would be a good
on.
one.
Nice.
So it's not the evil Dillip, though it is on par with what he enjoys.
So pushing a little further on your career, when we talk about the ASQ, the metrology handbook, did you also just naturally, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is in the quality realm. So did you also start doing a lot of the ASQ stuff and all that?
Oh, yes, yeah. I was involved with ASQ since 1990 at
Mm.
home. I was on the board for our local group, and yeah, a phenomenal organization. It's the organization for quality professionals. So I learned a lot through them. And the people in ASQ share so much. I learned a lot from other people in other industries. Come on in, we'll show you how we do corrective actions. Come on in, we'll show you how we do. You do my audit, I'll do yours. Oh, come on in, I'll show you how we use the test results. And very open, and learned a lot. ASQ was great. And so I was very honored and pleased when Heather asked me to write this chapter for the ASQ, because yes, I have involved quality, like the mining story. That was more than just what was in the lab that we call the QC. It was the whole quality system behind it. I like the statement that it doesn't matter how good a job you do in the lab if you don't report it correctly. You need that quality system. And
so
it
many
doesn't
people
matter
think
how well you report it if the lab does a lousy job. So you need both.
Right.
And so many people have one or the other, or they have that
Yeah.
good system because they have great people, and then they just don't want to report MU because they think it's hard. And it's like, it's not that hard. But
No, it's not.
Especially when you have your baseline, and it's just a few
And
things you're swapping out.
if you're
Yeah.
taking measurements, there's so many ways, and Jane can talk about this probably at length. There's so many ways you can calculate measurement uncertainty if you're taking measurement after measurement after measurement on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because-
Most of the labs that I go into, I say, you already have the data. You don't have to do any more experiments. Just give me 30 of these test results and I'll calculate it for you. Yeah, you're right, Henry. So often.
Yep.
It is that. Even in the like in the testing world, I've been talking to the mining industry, but I do work in pharmaceutical and the biologics. And even in the biologics, where they're having these big, large macromolecules working on the plate and coming in together. How do you do traceability for that? Somebody's, immune globulin from somebody's blood, and we figured out how to do it. But you're right, Henry, about the replication. In those kind of test methods, they have a lot of replication, partially because it is so variable. And as a result, they've got a lot of data that can be used to and establish traceability there. Their traceability. Oh, sorry, Henry.
No.
Oh no, I was just going to say they have it all. They don't realize they have it all done, right? And this is where AI comes in a little bit.
I was just going to say that.
AI, it's scary though. They need someone like Jane, or AI is not there yet. They need someone to review the numbers and say, okay, you're getting what you should be getting, or this is a reasonable estimate based on all the numbers that you're putting in. But yeah, AI is smart enough now that if you know how to ask it and what to tell it to do, that they could just dump history and all their history of data in, and it will come up with a very good representation of what their measurement process uncertainty is.
Yeah. Well, like to your point, the data and the calculations are pretty simple. I mean, average and standard deviation. It's understanding the data that goes in there, that not all these immune globulins are the same. Everybody's blood's a little different. You have to understand that impact to these results.
Yeah, because like a lot of us sit in the world where, I just started like an intermediate course for a lot of our sections, like temperature, for instance, and those, you have a lot of papers you can go to and reference for like what are people putting into these budgets, right? And you kind of get an idea, and then look at the impact, and you're like, okay, well, we're not doing this high end of one, or so on and so forth. But yeah, when it's such a like people are so unique from person to person, I can't imagine the struggles, trying to come up with the testing methods for that stuff. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, we are. As you say, this so unique. You need the scientists who understand the biological molecules, and they understand what makes them different. And for example, they've come up with guidances that if you're going to pool immune globulins from all these different people who have different blood, if you have 7 different blood types in your pool, it's going to have all the variation of everybody. And so there's a guidance that you use blood from 7 different of these different types of blood, and then you're done. That's where the scientific subject matter expert knowledge comes in. Like Henry said, you have to have that there, or your AI isn't worthless.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
otherwise it's going to be an average of all 7 and a standard deviation of all 7, and it's going to be quite ridiculous. I wanted to show, so those that are online, can you share this,
Yeah,
Ryan?
we
Everybody
had
see
this
it.
set up,
This
I
is
think. Oh, wait,
this
there
is
we go.
this is it. So Dillip is we're breaking to make fun of Dillip a little bit, and good jest, but
Yes.
Dillip is a little bit of a Star Trek fan, so there's some pieces on here, and he also always carries multiple phones. So making him the red shirt guy, you either one of you know who the red shirt person was? And so, yeah, Jane,
Yes.
Jane knows. He's the one that he's going to go with Kirk and McCoy.
Oh, yeah.
He's not coming back, right?
Always the one that, yeah, the guy that always dies in the scene.
The 3 phones is what. So I put this into AI, and for the people that are on YouTube can get a chuckle out of it. But
Nice.
yeah, he's got his
That's
3
great.
phones.
Well,
to
now we need the
represent.
evil one, though, like the Sith version, you know?
He wanted the Sith version of it, but anything Disney or Star Wars will flag you immediately. That for the most part, that'll say you can't do this, or
Oh, I gotcha.
that's
Yeah.
copyrighted. Red shirt Star Trek is okay. But you start saying make him Darth Shaw or Darth, because he likes the Darth Vader moniker a lot. He
Okay.
likes the Darth Shaw one. Though, yeah, I want to, because I said that earlier. But what you bring to this is so fascinating here, Jane, because we're going on, and before we started recording, we were talking about GLP-1s, but it's cancer research. It's all of this, and if you have the right people, to quote Jim Collins, right people on the right seats. Right, the scientists, the statistician, the people that understand the measurement, you have to have everything together, right, in all of this process. And if you're missing one, maybe if you have the people doing the right collection method, you'll have the data later to go back on and extract it. I mean, that would be my positive. But if you're not collecting the right information up front, that's a heck of a lot of waste that's going to need to be redone.
Oh, just hugely gigantic. And I like I'm talking about the immune globulins and how trying to get traceability for that, and looking down, even in those kind of test methods, they still use some instrumentation. They still have to have a good, maybe they use a balance, maybe they use an instrument that's measuring light, and all those have to be calibrated correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And all that, and then you have the study, the scientists bringing in how these molecules work together, and that. But how do you get traceability for that? And it is kind of neat in that. Well, that's where the certified reference materials come in, where you take a lot of, say, of these immune globulins. You say this is going to be our base, and every other lot made in the future is going to be compared to this one. And that's the way they do it. They make a certified reference material out of that. But this is a little bit scary here, I think, for people, is that for a lot of these biologics or complex pharmaceuticals that people take, there is no certified reference material. And one country has their standard and another country has their standard. And they don't compare.
Mm.
And so you can have the same drug listed with the same potency, and in one country the potency's up here, and the other country the potency down here.
So you could have.
So how, as a
you could have a 90% potency versus a 50% potency.
Yes, and there you are, a person traveling, and you go buy the drug in the pharmacy, and it's not working for you as well as it used to, and it's the same label. That is a story I tell a lot, because I think that's where the pharmaceutical industry needs to improve its traceability.
Yeah, have a worldwide kind of. Well, who would organize that? Is there an organizing body for these type of things?
The Pharmacopeias. United States Pharmacopeia, Japan Pharmacopeia, European Pharmacopeia, English Pharmacopeia, and then the WHO, they do that as well. So
Because
It, yeah,
because those are,
there's
I
a lot
mean,
of work to be done.
for a lot of us that are commercial lab people or done commercial, the pharmacopoeias come up quite a bit, depending on who you're working with. Like I worked with places that did like the nicotine patches and stuff like that. But yeah, those definitely are not extremely, at least from my experience, they'll just request things like it has to be an accredited lab that does it, right? But it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
the calibration itself has to be accredited, right? Like it's weird things like that is what I remember. I might be off on that. It's been a few years I've been doing sign, but I just remember it being, at least it prescribed things like that, but it didn't seem very in depth when it comes to metrology subjects. Am I right on that?
Yeah, and the pharmaceutical, yeah, it's because the FDA goes in, it's different than the ISO 17025 world with the questions that they ask. So yes, there's a big area for improvement there, but it
I've
is
heard.
coming.
Yeah.
Because they are looking at it. The pharmaceutical industry is looking at uncertainty, and something that just Henry and Ryan like just bugs me is the amount of money they could save.
Yeah.
Because,
Oh,
like you said,
Ryan and I talk about this all the time
oh,
because they're using let's just break it down, Jane. You tell me if I'm wrong. They're using TAR from what I hear when I talk to everybody. They're still using outdated methods if they're even using them. And then they're just saying, okay, we get this test accuracy ratio method. They may not be paying attention to certain things or mixing, and then they go back and dump a bunch of stuff because they suspect that they may have mixed it wrong. All kinds of water on the floor type of scenarios that someone discovers something and then maybe it's okay, maybe it's not. In any case, there's a lot of jumble I'm throwing in there. Is if they knew their measurements, they would reject so much less, and the risk of putting anything bad out there would go way, way down. So, because
yes,
what's the main cost right now? The main cost, at least besides mixing and once you get the measurements right, one of the bigger costs is if something goes out there and I'm going to get a lawsuit because of it. Right? Is that still the primary driver of everything? The fear of
yeah, the fear of they call it OOS, out of specification, and OOS, out of specification, and they don't understand the probability of an OS because they don't have the uncertainty. So you can't have traceability. They don't know the uncertainty, so they just get really conservative, like you say. And they'll throw things out, or if something is so expensive, they keep it. But then they put so much effort into making sure that it's still okay and not going to kill people. And if you just, I get called in these investigations and that, we really got to save this product. Okay, now I'll evaluate the uncertainty for you. Yeah, now you want to know it
Right.
instead of it.
Yeah, Greg Sanker was talking about something similar, right, Henry?
Yeah, they just do it. It was he went in. He was teaching a beginner uncertainty class, and people on their business cards that were in the class had metrologist, the label for what they were in the company. And he goes in and he's teaching beginning to uncertainty. Though what he had, the story he had, they were okay to just eliminate product. $1 million here, there, just everywhere. It's just okay. It's just part of doing business. And I've worked when I was back in some Six Sigma classes that I had early on. So many people, their bosses were just saying, "Oh, it's overrun. We'll use it anyway, or we'll do this." Well, medicine has a shelf life, and some of these chemicals have a huge shelf life that I'm sure Jane goes in to save their butts when they've done something that's maybe wrong and they don't want to lose how much money worth of stuff. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. Oh, there's another risk in pharmaceutical that you'll have the FDA or Health Canada or in Europe, they'll come in and investigate and they'll say, okay, how many lots are you throwing away? And they'll say, okay, why did you throw it away? And you have to give them, the company has to give the regulators a good answer, a science answer. And you, because the regulators want you to know your product They want you to understand what your product is. They want you to understand your measurements. And if and the only way to do that, we know, is uncertainty and traceability.
Mhm.
And so there's that regulatory risk as well, which is huge, because then you get shut down. I've gone into companies, where they were close to being shut down, and that's huge. That's expensive.
So if
And there's a
if they're throwing away, sorry, I
Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
we all talked about it. So if they're tossing, like Henry was saying, $1 million worth of product, I've seen that happen in my own personal experience with it. So what is a good excuse? Like, is it like, hey, there was someone put a setting in wrong, right? Like something very obvious that we know ruined the product or whatever. Or if they're like, we don't know, we just in QC it was too brittle. We're gonna have to go back and look at why. Or is it that type of stuff? Like they don't understand what happened and they're just throwing things away all the time?
Well, if whenever in pharma, whenever you have to, something does not meet spec, you have to investigate. And you can't just investigate to, well, oh, we don't know. Oh, well, if it happens again, we'll do something. That is not allowed or acceptable.
We'll
At
just
the
Probably
retrain the
good.
technician. That's on your.
no, that
So in that world though,
I
R&D is important, right? Because I remember working at some of these places, R&D was in a specific area, so I guess they're allowed to fail there, right?
yeah, and the knowledge from that failure and what and why has to be incorporated and learned and improved, and
Interesting.
the knowledge of that has to be transferred to the manufacturing so that they know how it can fail, that whole system. And I find uncertainty for the analytical test method, when you evaluate the uncertainty, it gives you that knowledge and understanding. It just comes out, and that's where companies could save so much more. That's where the United States Pharmacopeia had a new chapter come out. They call it 1220. Analytical Procedure Life Cycle, how you understanding your test method. It starts from, like you said, R&D, design, all the way through, and you have your control strategy, and it's all described there. And so that is being implemented in the pharmaceutical. And USP is ahead of the game with that. They were the first one to publish something like that. So it's using the whole uncertainty traceability tool to understand your method and to knowledge management. So R&D finds out something, you've got to follow that knowledge
It should
all
have a
the way through.
documentation trail to it.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
it.
And there's something else that goes back to, I mean, a lot of people here, I'm sure, work in calibration labs, and so where money could be saved. And when you look at your analytical procedure, and so you're going to use that balance. You get it calibrated. If you're going to use your spectrophotometer, different wavelengths, you're going to have that calibrated. But they just call in the calibration. They calibrate the whole thing according to however the manufacturer said across all these different wavelengths, and do it and pay for it. And then, they're only using it at one wavelength. And then I come in and audit, and it failed at another wavelength. So say they're using it 300 and they failed at 700. And I said, you failed at 700 and you didn't do anything about it. Well, we never use it at 700. Well, then why are you calibrating it there?
Yeah.
Because
So
we just.
either don't calibrate it at that wavelength, or if you do, then and it fails, you follow through. You don't just ignore it.
I
And so
can
there's an
answer it, Jane.
expense.
I can
That's an
answer it for
expense.
you. Because the person in purchasing was told, go get this calibrated. So they send a PO that
Yeah.
says, please calibrate per ISO 17025 if they're
Yeah.
accredited, and leave it at
Manufacturer
that. They
specs.
tell you nothing about, a decision rule 2 or how you take uncertainty into account or anything on those remotely, other than maybe they've been told to go back to the manufacturer because the manufacturer made it and they must have the best knowledge of this device. And sometimes we know that manufacturers are full of what. So just depends.
Right?
Specmanship is the word, right? It is, yeah.
So what do you guys say that? Because you got the manufacturer and they have all these specifications for how it should be built and should perform. And we have to start somewhere. We start there. And then the lab or manufacturer, whatever, but
Mhm.
I'm a chemist, the lab's going to use that piece of equipment.
Yep.
And I'm going to look at it and say, well, I don't need that small an uncertainty. A larger uncertainty is absolutely fine for me.
Mm.
What do you
Sure.
think of that?
I think that's fine. If
Yeah.
you're for your needs, the larger uncertainty is acceptable. I mean, isn't that the whole theory behind the decision rules, Henry?
Yeah, though, if you tell me you need, yeah, there's Jane knows this one too. It all depend. It's dependent on how well you know your process and the instrumentation. If you tell me you need 2%, I'm going to trust that you need 2%. Did you go through and do all your analytics to say that I don't, do I need, am I actually need 3% and I'm asking for 2% because I want that buffer. I
Mhm.
want that zone where things can still pass. Have I done my reliability study? Have I done the trend analysis on all of these for per cow to cow? Everybody wants. So Jane, what I get at more than anything else that I don't like is people want things adjusted back to nominal without understanding their process. And that's where I'm trying to dance around this topic. So somebody says, hey, tweak me in as close as to nominal as possible. But one year you might be 5 high. The next year you might be 5 low. And if you just left the freaking thing alone,
Mhm.
hey, I adjusted 5 high, and then the next year it shows 5 low, and it's like, well, that 5 high would have been 0 in year 2. That's a word salad for people trying to follow along, but yeah, 5 high, 5 low, leave it alone. Guess what? It's 0 instead of
Yeah.
5.
I know.
So
Yeah,
that's essentially what
yeah,
happens. But you need to understand that, and there's so many. Dilip Zero, because we were talking about him, Walter Schuhart. There's so many of these different the control charts and other things that people can use, and then you have to make the decision on where is my adjuster criteria for this particular device. Is it 1/3? Is it 2/3? And when I mean 1/3, is it 5 measurements in a row being 30%, eating up 30% of the tolerance to bring it back to nominal? Is it 2 at 70% of the tolerance to bring it back? Is it 1 at 90% of the tolerance because, hey, it's inched up that close? And you really what I think the disconnect is people do not understand their instrumentation, and the manufacturers are probably not being the most helpful on
yeah,
to
Well,
these
yeah.
people.
I've been in the conversations at manufacturers, right? Like I've been in the room where they're like, well, we need to make this spec to compete against XYZ
Oh,
competitor. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah. And where'd they get that from, right? Yeah, yeah.
Where
Right.
they
Yeah,
pull it
yeah.
from. Yep.
In pharmaceutical, the United States Pharmacopeia, there is the general chapter. It's numbered 1058, analytical instrument qualification, and we are rewriting it. We just published 4 articles proposing what we're doing. And in June, they just had USP just had a webinar about it, which I think you can go to the USP website and listen to. But it's bringing all of these concepts we're talking about to analytical instrument laboratories in the pharmaceutical industry. Use of uncertainty, the understanding of your method, defining your measurand, all of that.
Mhm.
And so I'm quite excited about that. There'll
That's
be,
great.
yeah, that's so that
What's
would be very good.
Jane? What's in there about adjustments? Do they have anything? Not to get too deep into the weeds on that, but I'm always curious on calibration, the interval analysis and adjustments
Mhm.
that people
Uh,
come up with.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about that, Henry, something came to my mind is probability and risk analysis.
Hmm.
And that is, I think, the answer to your question is that with adjustments, with you have the uncertainty, then you can have trend, which you can incorporate into your statistics. But at the end of all of those calculations, it turns out to be probability. When
Yep.
you have your uncertainty, it'll tell you the probability of the values, the
Mhm.
probability of scenarios.
Hmm.
And I think that is what's really coming out is that translating everything we're to metrology, traceability, translating that to probability. And I think that is beautiful because when you talk to the users of whatever you're doing, the manufacturing, the vice president of manufacturing, he understands probability. and you talk to the director of the laboratory, and she understands probability. You can talk their language, and we translate that. So your question about trends and adjusting, it always comes down to me. Okay, I would take that data and I'd calculate the probability to understand the impact.
Mm-hmm. And what the risk is with that impact, and then do an analysis, backtrack it, and say, hey, if I go out 9 months for a cow, my risk is too high. I better do it 6 months, even though it's going to cost us a little more. Or they could calculate it out that say, hey, this is a thermometer that we only need plus or minus 2 degrees, and it's spec'd at 0.2, and we can probably do every 3 years and be in.
Yeah.
Well, Henry,
Based on history.
Right.
So yeah.
when we're chatting about uncertainty, though, Henry, should we ask the question of the season, our podcast season?
What's the question of the season?
So when we're talking about these type of things like lab work and all that, obviously there's wide ranges of disciplines covered, right? Temperature to dimensional weighing, you mentioned. So Jane, how does the industry feel about resolution being included in those in those calculations?
What's your definition of, and I'm sorry to ask this, but I'm going to ask, what's your definition of resolution?
Well, I think in most cases we're talking about the UUT resolution, right?
Yeah, the instrument that's submitted for calibration, or the instrument that you're using for calibration. What is it?
And of course, I'm poking the proverbial bear here, but I just want to see your thoughts on it.
My answer would be the same. You have to, no matter what it is, you have to understand how the instrument works, and how these various resolution or other parameters translate into the performance of that, and how that translates into the probability.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, that's where that comes.
If you can detect it, because sometimes everything gets perfect. I have a quick story for this, Ryan and Jane. Some people find this interesting. Other people think it's boring as can be. But I calibrated my record player, the needle that goes down on the record. The downward force was supposed to be set at 1.5 grams. So I calibrated that with a known method 15 years ago. And what my resolution was 1.5. I did not have an extra digit. 15 years later, I see on Amazon, because I'm addicted to Amazon, one of their deals for $23 is I can get a force gauge with a 5 gram weight attached to it. And I can then go calibrate my needle and adjust my needle. So after 15 years, I put the needle on the force gauge. The reading on this force gauge read 1.51 grams. I basically wasted $23 because there's no way on and this is a very low risk situation. I hate saying that to the vinyl and audio files, that 0.01 gram is not going to do much of anything to my listening experience, though it is a very low risk situation, which I kind of laughed at, that for 15 years, that downward force that I adjusted held pretty darn well to scratch a record.
And I love the practical uses.
If the force is too great, then guess what? You're wearing into those grooves, and if it's too little, you might have chance of skipping and all the other stuff. But yeah, it's for the risk is not someone's life. It's not. It's I might have a scratch record, or I might prematurely wear my needle or record if I didn't set it right. So it's a kind of a laughable one. I know Greg gets into it though. I wanted to ask Jane specifically while we running just on the. And I think it's a super interesting topic because we were talking about this before and I brought it up, and it's the GLP-1s, and it's just general mixing of materials, right? You have Wegovy, you have Ozempic, you have, what was the other one we said? Manjaro. There's other names out there, and everybody knows the GLP. South Park's doing GLP-1 episodes where they're making, if you haven't seen it, they're buying the compound. The kids are buying the compound and making it, in South Park, and then the one gets skinny and everything else. But this is a big deal because if it's unregulated, or even if it is regulated, as you were saying earlier, different. Just describe how that all works together. There's two parts to it. The difference between 3 manufacturers across each country. I would imagine the dosages could vary a little bit right, from maybe like 85 to 90%, or wherever that is. Is that a correct assumption, depending?
Well, there's a couple of things. Briefly, the way the pharma works, it starts off with the clinical study, right, where they actually
Mm,
inject it into humans' bodies and they get the blood and they find out um, what concentration, what potency works. And usually,
mm,
I'll just throw some numbers out here for simplicity, but usually they'll say, okay, between 50 and 100, whatever units they're using, works in our study. So then they will manufacture somewhere between 50 and 100 if they can. Let's
okay.
keep this answer simple, and then I'll go say what I
Yeah.
mean by it. Yeah. So it's 50 to 100. So they're going to manufacture between 70 and 80. And so there's a huge safety factor there. So it doesn't matter if one needle injection has 70 and the other has 80. It has enough to work.
Right.
It's between 50 and 100. And then the rest of that uncertainty and all that between 70 80 is becomes control of the manufacturing and understanding of your product. That's really where the importance and the uncertainty comes in for that. So that's usually the way it works. Often in biologics, unfortunately, that it's the analytical procedure that is the largest source of uncertainty.
Mm.
And so that really has an impact. And then you've got to really control the laboratory and all the measurement in that laboratory. And so traceability is they do make reference materials for this, and I have had to do that in response to bioterrorism and botulism. There was no standard in the world after 9/11 handled. There was only a few vials left of
Mm.
what they had. We had to make a new standard. So we got the material, the only material there was in the world, and made a standard for that. So we had continuity going across. And if you're starting off brand new, you make that lot, and that becomes your measure, your
Mm.
That
standpoint.
becomes it for because if you're up, or that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
And
That's so
that's where
funny.
it's really important to have the uncertainty in there, because you've only got one lot. You don't have manufacturing variable. You've got to understand
Hmm.
what is variable and what's not, and what needs to be checked as the world gets more and more lots. So going back to this GLP-1, I mean, I just read this morning that you can order the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, GLP-1 online,
Yep.
right? And it'll
Yep.
come in and not be, if it's under 800 pounds or whatever, it's that de minimis weight. It just goes through, and they get it
Wow.
and they formulate it, and you don't know what that is. Now the major companies, they're all under GLPs. They're licensed, they're inspected. And I mean, I've been inspected by these regulatory bodies, and they're the best. They're very good.
So they have complete quality control.
This reminds me a lot of when I serviced the supplement industry, where it's like it was a lot of variability on how nice the facilities were and how things were tracked and stuff.
That's all over the place. Let's
Oh,
talk
it
about
was
that one
horrible.
too. So the GLP, you have the analytical procedure, and you're basically telling me that maybe Ryan making my GLP drugs, I should be a little worried. But it is Ryan, Jay.
Hey,
I
I'm
mean, he
precision.
is doing it. He's only buying 500 pounds at a time, and I'm told he's very careful with his.
Yeah, and what's he buying? How do you know what he's buying, right? Remember the melamine in the dog food years ago?
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that stuff, they got it from a very reputable company. I believe it was up in Canada, and they bought it from China. And so you bought it. The Canadian company had excellent reputation, but where do you get your active ingredient from? That's where the problem happens, and that's where, if you're getting a regulated company like the Novo Nordisk and all that, they have to have control over their API, whereas Ryan Don the street can't.
Hey,
He
I got a
cannot.
really good hookup. I love interviews like this though because for years, are you familiar? I don't know how. I know they're $1 billion company. I just don't know how well other companies, but like BioFire, are you familiar with them? Meru, I think it's
Oh,
their
by Mary, yeah, yes,
well, there's
Mhm.
the
yeah.
defense side, which is the American side, the BioFire. But I serviced these companies for years, but and you hear some of the things you're talking about, but you don't understand how it all correlates until you get a little further down the road, right? Like this was long before I was doing the school, but it's when you see it being done in person and yeah, you see the different processes from one company to another. Starts to make you think of a little deeper about where these things come from. That
It's
is,
Yeah.
scary.
yeah.
And you were talking about supplements, which billion-dollar industry, and Jane probably has a lot to add on that. And I'm sure almost everybody that's listening is probably taking some form of supplements. I know I take multivitamin. That's a supplement. You take what acidophilus, your probiotics, your prebiotics if you want to. I mean, the doctor did tell me. He said on prebiotics, just apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon, and a bunch of water. He said that's the best prebiotic you could take and stay away from the other stuff. Whether that's true or not, I tend to think it's pretty simple and cost effective. Though, but all this creatine is one that they say there's such a variation in it,
Mm.
but they're not monitored that well, from my understanding. Jane, what do you have to say about people that are out taking whatever supplement that's unregulated and
Yeah, well, the dietary supplements are regulated under the CFR, and that came out about what 2000, about 2009. The problem is the regulatory bodies don't have the resources to
Mm.
adequately inspect.
ah, that's
But
so
there
that's
are,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there are some companies that are very good. And
Right.
their business model is to do the right thing and to do it as well as they
For
can.
sure.
And so buying from, a really good reputable company is a good source. From the metrological traceability, I worked with the microbiologists in the dietary supplement world, and we published a paper, I think 3 years ago now, on how to evaluate the uncertainty for the test methods where in microbiology, the colony forming units, like how many probiotics are there?
Mm.
It says it's 12 billion. Are there 12 billion? And it's how to determine that. And the paper was
Right.
very well received. So we're just submitting now uh, to the Journal of Dietary Supplements a follow up to that, where I've created a workbook that will help people evaluate the uncertainty for these kind of test methods. And we had a company that worked with us in writing this paper, and they actually took the process into their laboratory, and they manufactured lots and analyzed using this process. It's ANOVA, analysis of
Mhm.
variance, very
Right.
very straightforward, simple, and they did that. And you'd mentioned before how the overage, right? Well, they add a lot of overage because they don't know the uncertainty for their method or their manufacturing. So they just add a whole bunch more of these probiotics, how many billions more. So using this process, they analyzed it. And so, they had the limit, and they added a whole bunch more because they wanted to make sure that they weren't under limit. And it
Mm.
turned out their uncertainty was much smaller than they expected. And they could add billions less because their overage was way too
It's the old
much.
baker's dozen, but like
Yeah.
Yes,
your
yes,
your biotic billion.
yeah, yeah,
Like 2 billion less probiotics.
We
Hey,
give
let's
you
yeah,
just
that
call it
13th
marketing
billion.
will just call it 2 billion more. We're better than everyone
yes,
else.
yes, yeah. Yeah, it was neat being on that call when I presented the data to the manager of that lab, and what? Wow. Ooh.
Yeah.
And yeah.
They were
So,
probably
oh,
thrilled. There's probably substantial savings there for them,
Oh, I'm
right?
sure.
there could be, yeah, yes, and better control over their manufacturing too. Yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Knowledge is
they're
power.
Yep,
Knowledge
and
is
then you
money.
have become a reputable brand, and that's what so in the supplement world, and not to name any names, though, you have these companies that are out there that make the claims, and you have huge range of pricing from
Mhm.
$60. So if I want to buy a B complex, I know this one. I could get a B complex from now for probably $12 or something like that. Or I could go with this high-end one for 60. Is there going to be that much? And this is a risky question because it all depends on who's the lab and what they're doing and how well they know it. But is there going to be that much difference? I mean, the perception is $48 more if I can afford it, that I should be getting a better value. In your experience, would I be? Is that an unknown, or is that a more often than yes? Or do you have any thoughts on it?
Could be.
Could be. Yeah,
Could
it's an unknown then, right?
Hard
You
to
just
say.
maybe.
Yeah. I've seen
Maybe.
situations where it definitely makes a difference, and I've seen situations where it doesn't. And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
supplements are hard. And to be clear,
tough question.
the BioFire and BioMeru or whatever, those were examples of very strict places. The places I went that were subject were the some of the supplement places. So I got to see the best and the worst. I got to see both
Yeah.
ends of the spectrum.
I've heard rumors. We have a couple of our team members that have worked at those places or went in there. And the one story was quite funny. He didn't take the job with us and took the job with them. And then I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks later, he called us, "Is this still available?" I said, "Yeah, what's up?" He's like, "Everything you said was true." The guy that my coworker was so happy to see me because he's been sleeping at his desk and he hasn't had a holiday at home. And
Oh
all this. And
no.
he's like, "I'm not doing this." And there was a little bit of a request to just fudge things here and there. But
Oh,
yeah, that's a
yeah,
whole nother.
that's a
Yikes.
It's
whole nother.
good. Sign off on it. It's good. This happens all the time. Type of yeah. Like, okay. Yeah. No. No. So the other thing that's really interesting while we have you on the phone, Jane, is the Tylenol. Right? Netflix had a recent, and I don't know how many people know it, but you could look it up. The Tylenol murders, the case, and all of this. And I thought it was an fantastic. I think it was a 3-parter on this one guy. Maybe he put cyanide into the Tylenol, but then they triple sealed because of this. They increased protections for all of us, which was great with the glued seal and the wrapper and anyway. But then people still died. I think there were a few afterwards that still died from and they said cyanide was in the plant. And we may never know the answer because Tylenol, the company that makes Tylenol, just pulled it all back and burn it all up. Right? Have you heard you've heard about this story, but is there anything else that these cases, when you see these things happen, not specifically with Tylenol or incriminate anybody or all that, but is there anything else that you've seen happen, like with that whole process, if something like that were to happen today, what generally, I'm assuming they're not going to just burn the unit. They're going to be tested and everything's going to be tested and sampled, or is that not the case?
That's a really good big discussion, and I've worked a lot in the food industry as well, which we eat a lot more food than we take drugs, I hope.
Right.
Yeah. And there has been a fundamental change to testing that has occurred over the last couple of decades, and in response to these, there's that talent, but there's the heparin in blood, and there's a number of cases where food has been contaminated, and the melamine, right, in our milk. And as a result of that, in the past we used to test food and drugs to be okay, this is supposed to be this, is it? We test, make sure, yes, it is. It's supposed to be sodium chloride. We dip our little spatula into the sodium, put it in the flame, get this bright yellow flame. Okay, it's sodium, check. That's what we tested for. Now we have learned we actually have to test more for what could be in there, the contaminants, the adulterants, the fraud. And that's totally changed, because what else could be in there? Well, that's huge. That's the world. And how do you test for that? And so in our regulatory bodies for food, and that's now the biggest job they do is they sit there and think, like, companies are required as a risk analysis, what could be put in this food that would poison it, and then they'd have to put in a program to prevent that. It's really changed the way things are manufactured, treated, and tested, and that's resulted in a lot of new test methods. Like the nuclear magnetic resonance has some huge opportunity that way, because with those, you get a little bit of a different molecule in there, you're going to get a different spectrum. It doesn't matter what it is, but it shouldn't be there. We should not have a peak in this place. Then they can go look. So it's really changed the type of testing that you do. And
So are you
so, you know, then
saying
how do you,
they kind of
yeah,
go for a wide spectrum look and just see what is popping up for each batch type thing?
yeah.
Mm.
And
And
you
then
have
they
to
throw
almost
away
do
the
every
batch.
batch.
Do they throw away or do they keep the batch? Do you know?
Well, it would all depend on the risk analysis, but I think they
Okay.
would want to find out what it is.
Yeah, do some more digging and figure out where it came
Yeah.
Well,
from.
there
Like
was
the
some.
Tylenol that they burn everything, they still don't know where it came.
Well,
They have no idea where that came
even
from.
getting away from like the pharmaceuticals, there's a guy on TikTok I was watching that tests honey, and there's like
Yes.
they go through that is it a mass spectrometer? I'm so out of my world saying these things, but some form of thing where they can see the whole spectrum, and they're looking for
Yes.
certain markers that they
Yes.
know is in a standard honey, right? That they know is from
Yeah.
the bees.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, from this, you know, it's testing for fraud. And I remember when I first started in chemistry, I walked into this food testing lab and I saw, this is back, you know, when they had books. The book for testing orange juice was this thick. And that's back in the
That's about 3
1980s.
inches, right, Jane?
Yes,
Wow.
yeah. And it was all, so I started looking at how to detect if there's cane sugar in your orange juice, how to detect if there's honey in your orange, how to detect if there's orange peel, how do you, like all these ways the companies would, try and make their not orange juice. Uh, you know, so, uh, so you've got this, but how do you do metrology and traceability for that?
Hmm.
It's for what you don't know you're analyzing for. So that's where, like, the kind of question you see this peak and shouldn't be there. You want to make sure that your instrument is working really well. So
Sure.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes metrology doesn't impact the uncertainty, Bradley, but you've got to make sure the instrument's working.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's where that's
Because that's not
a
necessarily
discussion I have with
quantitative.
labs a lot.
Is that what you're saying? You're looking more for a peak, less than the quantity of the said peak, right? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
You're looking for irregularities in
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the sample because you don't know what those irregularities are. You just know what a good sample looks like.
Yeah. So make sure the
Right.
peaks that should be there are there, and the peaks that aren't there aren't.
Yeah, it does make
Yeah.
I'm so glad for that TikTok because I've actually visually seen someone looking at this. So I have in my mind an idea of what what we're talking
It's
about.
cool. It is so
It is,
cool. And
and it affects everybody, Henry.
we all eat it up the street. But then the other thing that gets weird and is, so if they have bad food, a lot of times they make animal crackers up the street from where I work, and
Mhm.
they'll if the lot's bad or they deem it bad, it's got too much of something, it'll become animal feed. It'll go there, and I'm like, well, is that? But yeah, I guess they have all those protocols worked out, and the mixtures aren't that. We're talking animal cookies, so they're not that bad. In fact, that place used to, because they didn't have their weighing in line as well as it needed to be. They almost every bag that would say 16 ounces would be slightly more. They would overfill just to never get a penalty. That was the risk analysis, and that's knowing your measurements, right?
Mhm.
You probably still overfill a little because you don't want to go under your whatever your allowance is. But yeah, the closer you can get it, the less you're wasting. The more product you have, the more money you make overall. So in general with that, though, yeah, the supplement stuff, the just all of this, the food, and now you get the salmonella outbreaks. We're seeing more and more of
Listeria.
listeria, yeah, listeria outbreaks, um, all of those, and yeah, it's just crazy stuff.
Well, that's where I think traceability and metrology are very
Yeah.
important for our food. And now you mentioned AI before, and we're moving away from physical. You know, the certified reference materials that we usually
Yep.
talk about. We're moving away from that to digital reference
Yep.
standards.
Right.
So that instead of buying a vial of biotin, for example, and presenting that to your instrument, you show your instrument, okay, this is pure biotin, and then you
Yep.
show your sample, does it look the same? Well, instead of sending you the vial of biotin, they'll send you that chromatogram, that spectrum,
What it should look like.
digitally. Yeah,
Makes sense.
digitally. It's just a computer file, right? That's what they send you now. And so with that's starting, and I'm asking them, okay, what's the uncertainty for that?
Hmm.
I know how to do the uncertainty when you send me a physical file. Okay,
Right.
Right.
what's the uncertainty when you're sending me a computer file?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you would
Do they
think it's
know
just
it? I mean, they could get it though, because you're gonna have.
well, it would seem to me, and it's not an intrinsic standard, right? But it seems to me similar to
No.
that, where it would have a reported uncertainty that they figure out in the creation process, right?
And that's what they're looking at right now.
But
Yeah,
are they
they're
deriving that from the actual sample, like the reference material? Is it reference material run through how many iterations and how many different machines that do this to give you that result? Is that what they're doing? Because that's going to be I would imagine that's going to be a pretty darn good. I'd also imagine there'd be some more uncertainty there, a little more
Well, I
uncertainty.
get what you mean, Henry, because it wouldn't be just someone collecting that data. It'd have to go through many different, like, wouldn't they have to have a reproducibility in there as well?
I would think so,
So
right?
yeah, it would have to
Yeah,
be many different machines, and yeah, I get,
yeah.
yeah, it's
And then you
Ah,
and then you just squash those numbers together and you say, if you want to use this curve will have the uncertainty that's this, and maybe if you have the reference material, your uncertainty could get less because the reference material was that start of the unbroken chain of calibrations, right? The back to the reference material. But then we had to make all these measurements on all these different machines, have all the variability. All that variability increased our uncertainty, and it's probably a better representation of the actual uncertainty, in my opinion. Jane, what do you think? Is it or is it not?
that's a really good discussion. And I'm waiting to hear. I am actually waiting to hear back for the answer on this, how they're going to do it. So
well,
there's good ideas here.
and
And
this podcast will release in July. How soon would you think they'll be coming out with the
uh,
somewhat of the answer on that?
soon, I don't know yet.
Okay.
Soon, there are some available, but I don't think they're real digital standards per se. But they'll be coming out soon. I'll let you know, Ryan. You can
Yeah.
have a follow up.
That'd be
You
fun.
could be-
Well, yeah, we're getting
oh,
close to the
definitely
end of
have a
our
follow-up.
we're
Yeah.
getting close to the end of our time for this episode anyway, but I think there's a lot of different subjects I would love to have you back on for. Just because I mean the food one is just so
Super
pertinent to
interesting.
everybody. Yeah.
I mean, everybody does this. We go off and talk about pressure, and it's like, well, pressure is in almost all of our lives somewhere, or shape or form. Force out somewhere, all of the temperature somewhere. But everybody can relate to sticking something in their mouth or chewing on
Well,
it.
and the quality of our food and drugs and all of those things are a hot topic in the country right now, right? Like
It
those are
is. Yeah.
on like evening news type stuff,
There's a lot of political
Yeah.
stuff going on around it too, and it's just I've watched a lot of documentaries on this. The Canadian food pyramid is drastically different than
Mm.
our food pyramid, right? And not trying to get all into it, but it's these. If those are different, why are they different? And then you start getting like what Jane's saying about these testing methods, and are they going to agree?
Right.
Is Europe going to have a different standard than the US? Is there going to be differences all around? And there's where you kind of hope. Um, Full circle to where we started. Jane was presenting at A2LA, and she actually turned me on to the Eurochem documents, which I think are actually fantastic documents.
Yeah.
They're related to metrology. I've pulled from them quite a bit for presentations. They're not related to what we do, but the general topics and what are in those Eurochem documents are pretty fantastic overall, and they're all free to download.
Oh,
And they
cool.
are coming out one for instruments.
Oh, they are? Okay, great.
They are, yeah. So
Yep.
keep an eye on that website because it's well along in the draft. I thought it was going to be published already. It's that far along. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've
From
quoted them. I've cited them since, and I credit obviously because you're at a conference or a tech forum or whatever they call it now, tech fo or
Annual con, yeah,
annual con and con. We got to
and
shorten
con.
it and say so, and then you learn greater you learn about new series of documents that help us all. So yeah, that's just
Yeah,
awesome.
it
Yeah.
is.
So I'm thrilled that you came on. I
Yeah,
think
thank
this
you,
we
Jane.
are checking off the Metrology Handbook authors. We've had Georgia, Tony,
Fabulous.
Dillop, Heather, Wade, Walter's been on. I'm probably missing some. I think there's only like one or two left there. So,
If
thank you
I
so
ever run
much.
into you in person, Jane, I'll make sure I have my book so you can sign it like Heather, because
Okay.
Heather signed mine.
What did Heather write to you, Ryan? Never change.
It's
You're the
private.
best.
No,
It's
yeah,
not.
Ryan, you're my favorite metrologist. That's what it says. Yeah. No, it's a
May
generic one, I
uncertainty
think.
guide your path.
Yes. Well,
That's a fantastic one.
now, Jane, no pressure, because obviously you're hiding out at the lake for the summer. But if people have any questions or anything, are they? Do you have a LinkedIn or anything that people can message you?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I have a LinkedIn, and yes.
That's great. I'll make sure to tag you in the post when we
Okay.
post it, and then people can reach out if they have
Yeah.
some
Yep.
testing questions.
So it's Jane
Great.
Weitzel,
Oh, it's
and
all
that's
good.
LinkedIn. And smoke signals, you prefer those too while you're in the Morse code? What?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tell
By
Flying
which
people,
banner.
standard? Only
I
by the
tell
ANSI standard.
my
USP
when I'm
standard for smoke signals.
yeah, sometimes when I set my autoresponder, I'll say like I'm in the Amazon jungle and can be reached by smoke signals and see if I get a stupid laugh. So it's always something stupid.
It's a good one.
Or I'm at Oslo and competing in the World Air Guitar Championships, or something I looked up and thought was funny that I never do.
Well, Jane, thank you once again, and all of you listening. Thanks for listening and watching.